Okay. First of all, thank you for being here and coming on the show. So let me give you a little bit of a background about what I'm trying to do. So I'm a grade 10 learner in next school, and ever since I was a kid, sports have always interested me. And I'm also currently interested in business. So I'm trying to understand how business affects sports and how the connection plays a huge role in determining various factors. So I wanted to speak to you about this topic as well, and let's get started if I may.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to be here, and thank you so much for thinking of me to be part of this project of yours.
Thank you. So the first question I had was, so you have a variety of experience in sports related fields, like including like operations at Mumbai City FC and also media and content. So what was like the start of your sports management career?
Uh, the start I had was working in the event space, so basically organizing on-ground events in sport, whether it was small, tiny tournaments or large scale events for live sporting audiences. So I've done everything from hospitality to housekeeping to making sure the internet is up and ready, registration of athletes, setting up the event, which is, for lack of a better, yeah, setting up the event. I think that's just what it is. So your branding, for example, your kiosks and your registration desks and chair and making sure the court or the field is ready for play. So I did operations for the first 8 years of my sports career. After that, I went into um, the internet space. So I helped launch an international sports organization's website for India called nba.com. Post that, I took a short break, but after that, I went ahead and started my own sports journalism startup. So essentially, did long form sports storytelling from a journalism standpoint of view because I thought there were a lot of good stories in sport out there which are not being told, to be honest. And post that, I did 4 years of freelance content consultancy, and then post that, I'm now with Mumbai City FC, where I manage most of the operations off the field for Mumbai City FC. So you have stuff that happens on the field and you have stuff that happens off the field. I manage the off the field stuff. So that's my. I know you asked me where did I start, but that's roughly my career trajectory.
Okay, I can understand where you started from now and where you are today. So I read that you were into banking for a bit.
I used to work in a bank. I think that's probably
Yeah,
a
so
more
I
accurate way
framed
to
the
put it.
question around that because
Go
going
ahead.
from banking to sports is something, it's like a radical shift. So I was gonna ask what motivated you, to make that shift, and what are some of the most difficult aspects of that change?
So, what motivated me to make the shift was I always wanted to work in sport, but where, so I was born and raised in the UAE, and then I moved back to India for my graduation, went back to the UAE to look for a job. And at that point of time, the UAE wasn't really big on sport. And this is, I'm saying 2000, early 2000s, or mid 2000s for lack of a better, actually, mid 2000s. But I really wanted to work in sport. But at that point of time, the only job I could get was, either in the finance sector or the shipping sector or the trade sector, which are the big sectors in UAE at that point of time. So I got a job in the bank, and it was a good job. I don't complain. I had a great boss. Work hours were hectic, but I really liked what I did because I had a really good team around me. And eventually, I felt the need to, join the sports industry. And then I was looking for opportunities, but in the UAE, there were no opportunities. So I looked towards India. And I found two, three places. I applied to them. I kept chasing them. In fact, I chased them for a year. They did not have opportunities at that point of time. Eventually, they had opportunities, and then I got the chance to interview, and then I got a job. So I then quit the bank job in the UAE and then moved to India to join the sports industry. And I think the hardest part of that wasn't at that point of time. At that point of time, I was extremely comfortable with the decision. I really enjoyed the idea. Definitely my parents were still in the UAE. They eventually retired and moved back to India, but at that point of time, they were still in the UAE. I had a lot of close friends because I grew up in Abu Dhabi, right? So I had a lot of close friends. Life was comfortable. So I think transitioning from there, uh, it I think about it now, and I don't think it was hard that then as well, because for me the focus was on getting to work in the sports industry. So all those things seemed very minuscule at that point of time. Of course, now if you ask me, that's almost 18 years later. I can tell you that it was not easy to transition because I came from a place that was so comfortable to a city like Mumbai, where I pretty much did not know anything. Yes, my mom was from Mumbai and I had an uncle here, but he lived quite far away and I had no friends, no social circle. I do not know how to navigate this city, and it's a tough city to be in fact. And you're from the city yourself. So, in that regard, I think the first 6 months of being in Bombay were very hard. And there was also not much work happening simply because my boss at that point of time, who's today also still till date a very good friend, his whole idea was not to get you to jump into the deep end of the pool. His idea was, I need you to first get up to speed with a bunch of things that we do, and then one day you'll get to hit the ground running. And that was a 6 month long journey. And in the 6 months, because there was no work happening, I had no friends. Um, you know, in Bombay, that thing became a bit difficult for me. Uh, I think the second regret or the second thing that was challenging was not so much that time, but now is definitely the financial aspect, right? Now, don't get me wrong, sports pays very well now. But I mean, let's say in the last 5 years. But when I joined, it was not a very well-paying industry in India. And that's only because it was still growing. People were still figuring out. We didn't even have too many sports companies at that point of time, right? So from a financial standpoint of view, seeing my friends in Abu Dhabi, have their salaries increase 10% year on year and buying cars and buying houses and having this nice stuff, and which I couldn't have because my salary was obviously not on par with theirs. That really bothered me at that point of time. So it was definitely a bummer, but again, I realized those things were difficult now because when I was back then, except for maybe the loneliness in Bombay, I was just so happy that I was working for sport. So while I saw my friends get these cars and all, it didn't bum me out then. I was like, because I'm getting to work in sport, it's such a cool space to be. But now, as I grow up, as I'm older, I'm thinking of my psychology and my mentality at back then. I was like, it did bother me, but I was just constantly, ignoring it in a way.
So, I mean,
But yeah,
you've traded money for passion. And I mean,
at that point of time, yes, yes.
but
Not so much now anymore. Yeah.
but do you regret that decision? I mean, I don't think so you would.
Well, depends on where I'm at. I mean, if I'm at a nice car showroom and I want to buy a really nice car, then probably I might regret that decision. No, but in all seriousness, the short answer is no, right? Is because I got experiences that no amount of money in this world can buy, right? I got a chance, for example, I'm a passionate basketball guy. I got a chance to travel to the NBA All-Star game in 2013.
Oh, really?
And yes, so I did pay for my tickets and my hotel, but because I had done some work for the NBA guys in India, they hooked me up with tickets to the All-Star game,
Oh,
which
that's
by the way, I was willing to pay by myself. But they said, hey, listen, and the guy at that time, Akash Jain, very, very, he's also a good friend. He said, hey, listen, man, I know you want to buy your tickets, it's cool, but if you don't mind kind of doing a blog for us, of your experience and then put it up on the website in India, I'll swing a ticket for you. And that was really great because it wasn't so much for the ticket because the ticket could be purchased. But when I was in Houston at that time and I was walking around the stadium, I met a colleague, not a colleague, actually, she was working in NBA New York, but she was in Houston for the All-Star game. And I had met this girl when she was in India for a couple of events. Her name is Natalie, and We're like, hey man, funny bumping into you here. I did not know you were coming, so on and so forth. She's like, hey, by the way, do you want a crazy experience? And I said, sure, I'm happy to do this experience. What are you talking about? And then, so at every All-Star game, you have an experience which is somewhat called the commissioner's experience, the commissioner's guest experience. So it's an experience where you go to the back door, you get to see the dressing rooms, you get to stand on the side of the court, you get to see that experience, and that's only exclusively for like very, very high-end sponsors or even commissioners guests, like the NBA commissioners guest.
So did you get to meet
And
Adam
she was
Silver?
in so that time it was not Adam Silver. That time it was David
David
Stern.
Stern. Yes.
In a sense, David Stern. It was David Stern's last season, Adam Silver's first season in a way. So they were transitioning. So I got to attend the conference. In fact, the press conference, David Stern's last press conference. But before that, I got a chance to walk at the to see the dressing rooms. I got to see the court. Like I was standing on the court, and I like there was this one point in time I'm walking past the dressing room, and like Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Westbrook were having a conversation here, and then I walk a little ahead, and there's Tim Duncan, and walk a little ahead, and there's Kevin Garnett. So that experience, you could have all the money in the world, and you cannot buy that experience, right? So in that sense, I don't regret the fact that I kind of traded passion. Sorry, I traded money for passion. But I'm human at the end of the day. So whenever I see a nice what you can say pair of shoes, I was like, I think it's a little too rich for me in that sense. But otherwise, I'm very happy with the decision I made.
That's great to hear. That's very inspiring, actually.
Right.
So the next question I wanted to ask you was, so I mean, based on your experience here at Mumbai City FC, what are some of the important business choices that you've learned that a professional football team must make?
I don't think it's unique to football. I think there are certain decisions that every club needs to take. It could be basketball, volleyball, cricket, football, so on and so forth. Uh, the first is obviously from a business standpoint of view. The first is very, very important to make sure people are taken care of, right? And I'm talking about people on both sides of the spectrum, right? The fans, they are people as well, and even our own people, right? With the people who work within the club, the players, the staff, the first team staff, youth players, so on and so forth, right? So I think just making sure and understanding that for all this to move, at the end of the day, human connection is really, really critical, right? Or the capacity of a human, their emotional well-being, their mental well-being, their financial well-being. I think that's very, very critical, right? Understanding that without humans, none of this works, right? So that for me is the most important. So people is the most important decision, and any decision to try and make people as comfortable as possible, right? You're not going to get it right 100% of the time. In fact, most of the time you fail. That's just the reality of running a business. But the few times that you succeed, you hope to succeed so much that people remember you for that, right? Uh, the second business decision would be ensuring that the club, your club and your organization stands for something, right? There's some principles, there's some protocols, there are some beliefs that you have that okay, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? And the reason why this is a business decision is because often you will get to a point where in a business, and not just with football clubs or any clubs, but any business, you'll get to a point where you might have to make a decision that seems financially lucrative, right? But um, from a principle standpoint of view, you don't want to agree to it, right? And there are many of those, right? I'm not going to go into the specifics and the details. And that is a very difficult decision to make at times. And so you have to know what you stand for, why you stand for it, who you are as a person, why do you do what you do, and make sure that everybody understands that so that your business decisions can be influenced by your principles, your priorities, your
And this
goals, your
plays out better in the
objectives.
long term as well, I feel, because
Absolutely, absolutely. And the challenge always is that you can't, there's always a battle between short term and long term, right? Because at short term, you also want to stay afloat, but you also want to aim for long term sustainability, right? So that business decision is very critical to understand. What are your set goals, your set priorities, your set objectives, your principles? That's very, very critical to
So, I
understand,
mean,
right?
it's like asking yourself, are you here to build a sustainable business model or are you here to make a quick buck? So, making that.
Absolutely. And the tough part is both those answers are not wrong. I mean, you also want to make a quick, but you also want to build a sustainable model. So finding something that balances the two is what is challenging for not just for football, but for any sports or any business for that matter, right? As you said, you're interested in business and you'll go ahead, you'll learn that as well, right? Um, and the third business decision that I think that I have learned, and I think is very, very critical uh, for any organization, and particularly sports organizations, is to understand that there is an emotion to sport, right? Now, this may seem like I'm talking about the first point, right? But it is not. I'll tell you why. You will rarely find somebody, let's say, if I were to ask you, what is your favorite fridge brand? I mean, you use a fridge every day, right? Do you have a favorite fridge brand? No. Let's say I see you're wearing glasses. Can I ask you what are your favorite glasses or frames brand? You're like, I mean, I'm cool with anything, right? But when I ask you, what is your favorite football team or your favorite athlete? Suddenly your eyes light up and you're very passionate about that. Now, what is the score of that? That is emotion, right? So when I tell people that the sports industry is just like any other industry, the only difference is that sports works on emotion because you might find people who are passionate about cars, but you will very rarely find somebody who's passionate about one car. Very rare, right? Similarly, with the other things that I spoke to you about, like refrigerator, air conditioning, watches, clothes, you will find people passionate about certain aspects, maybe one or two brands, but compare the most passionate watch. So let's say there's a person A, and that person is extremely passionate about watches. He or she knows everything about watches, loves this particular brand, has gone and seen their factory, everything. And you compare that person to the most passionate sports fan you have, and the passionate sports fan will beat that person hollow. So while in sport it's important to make business decisions because that's the question you ask. It's always also important to understand that a lot of sports business hinges on emotion. So it's not as simple as this is a logical way to get from point A to point B. There is a logical way, 100%. And a lot of organizations, including our organization and many other organizations, do take that decision sometimes. But good sports organizations always understand that at the core of everything we do is emotion. And when you recognize that, you also tend to make better business decisions because you know that you cannot only just be, acha, X mean A equals B equals C, so A is equal to C. It's not as simple as that, right? So you have to understand emotion. So I know these are not business points that I mentioned, but understanding people, making sure your principles are in place, and understanding that sports all about emotion. These are not your conventional business ideas, but these are what drives sports business, in my opinion.
Okay. I understand. The there are many external factors as well to business. And
Right.
I mean, in India, I was discussing in a podcast earlier with Amrit Mathur, who's a renowned journalist. So we were discussing
Mhm.
about cricket, and I also learned he was talking about myths about cricket, and I also learned how cricket is treated like a religion, but it's not really a religion. It's just the emotion levels are so high, people consider it to
Mhm.
be a religion, and
Mhm.
that's what drives many of the decisions in the cricket world. But with football,
Yes.
obviously, it's a different scene altogether.
Yeah, with football, especially in India, we are still a young country, right? I
Yeah.
mean, yes, we've been playing football for a very long time. We have one of the oldest tournaments in the world. All that's 100% right? But from an organization standpoint of view, I would say you have to consider just the I League and the ISL, and we are still learning. So often when I meet young football fans, I always tell them be patient with the clubs, right? They of course it's natural for them to compare us to the best in the world, right? Whether it's a Man City or Man United or Real Madrid. So, and I'm okay with that comparison because we want to aspire to be there at the end of the day, right? We want to aspire to be like those clubs. They are well run, they're well oiled machines, they know how things function, they've been doing this, they've been at the top of the game for a very long time. So, and I've not met a single person in Indian football who doesn't aspire to be there. But it's one thing to, it's like, if I meet a young rocket scientist today, right? And let's say the young rocket scientist says, I want to be Elon Musk. I'm not going to say, oh, you're a fool. I'm saying, hey, that's great. You aspire to be Elon Musk. But I also have to recognize where you are today in your 10th grade or 11th grade or 12th grade, right? And you will take your time to get there. So I always use that comparison for football clubs. We want to get there, but also accept us for where we are and walk with us as we grow in that journey. So that's very important to understand.
Okay. Yeah. So, I wanted to ask again, how does, a club strike the balance between maintaining a profitable business or like an operation and also assembling a competitive team at the time? Because the aim of the sports team is to win at the end of the day. So, how do you strike that balance? Because I know players can be costly, but how do you find the best balance?
So that's the challenge. I mean, my response to you would be if you found anybody else who's found the answer to that question, then please introduce me to them, because it's not an easy task, right? But I would actually go so far as to say that that's not necessary. You can take that with any business, right? Let's say you're starting a tech company. In a tech company, the best tech people in the world are expensive. So you want to have the best tech people on your organization because again, like you said, at the end of your goal is to win. And business in business winning is either profitability or getting from one year to the other, right? Is making sure you get to the year you can meet payroll, you can meet your expenses, so on and so forth. So you ought to get the best talent, but the best talent is expensive. So how do you find a balance between those two, right? And it ties in back to what I was saying earlier, which is what are our principles? What are our objectives? What are our goals? What are we building for? Are we building for a short-term goal or are we building for a long-term goal? Yes, in the short term, and I've not met a single football person or any sports person who said, oh, well, this season we don't care about it. We are okay with losing. No, nobody likes losing.
But I've seen
Not a
that
single
concept in
person.
basketball. Some teams tanking.
So the reason why that happens in basketball is to some extent, and again, nobody knows, nobody admits it publicly as well,
Yeah,
right? But it does
obviously.
happen, and you've seen it, right? And that's also because there is some sort of they think there is some sort of a reward at the end where they end up getting the number one pick or number two pick, so on and so forth. But if you go to see the NBA, and since you brought up the NBA's conversation, they're not sleeping on that problem and they're constantly finding ways to see if we can tackle that problem. Right now, it went from, for example, the team with the worst record automatically getting the number one pick to now the team with the worst record has the highest chance to get the pick, but the next three team also have a chance to get a pick, right? That's point number one. Point number two is historically, I mean, unless you have a player like Wemby or LeBron that came out, how many other number one picks or number two picks are actually doing significantly well, right? Ben
Yeah,
Simmons
that's
got
fair.
wiped out. Joel Embiid does well, but again, he's very streaky. So teams are also beginning to realize that the number one pick or number two pick through a draft is not the only way to build. You can find a way. I mean, since you mentioned you follow basketball, and look at the Oklahoma City Thunder, right? It's not like they chased the number one pick or number two pick. They built slowly. Sam Presti built a collection of picks, went and got a bunch, traded some picks to get a bunch of players, put together a roster which did not have a single number one pick in that sense, and they won the championship. So NBA teams are beginning to understand that, and I give this credit to a large extent to the Warriors, right? Because the Warriors understood that building a culture of winning is more important than building a winning team. You understand the difference?
I do.
Building a culture of winning. So, what is a culture of winning? A culture of winning doesn't mean that you win all the time. A culture of winning is understanding that to win, there are some sacrifices and some things we have to put in place before that. And sacrifices could be in terms of losing players, bringing players, money, no money, whatever. But it's also those little things you do on a day-to-day basis. There's a famous story with the Warriors where Steve Kerr, when he joined the Warriors, his first practice, he just got everybody to do dribbling exercises, ridiculous when you think of it. These are guys are NBA players. They are 450 of the best basketball players in the world. And the best coach has stepped in there and he's saying, you guys have to do dribbling exercises. One right hand dribbling, left hand dribbling, crossover dribbling. It's like, why are you getting NBA players? They know this stuff. But his point was that you have to start from the basics in order to build that culture. And by doing that, one of the things that the story actually revealed was that by doing that, he was making sure that the same rules that applied to the star, which was Steph Curry, applies to or rather, the same rules that apply to the junior most rookie in the team applies to the star Steph Curry. So it's across the team. It's not restricted to one person.
It
So
creates a
building a winning
balance
culture.
between. So, I mean, I often see players, I watched The Last Dance and I saw how Michael
Mhm.
Jordan got away with, everything he wanted. And the rookies,
Right,
that was the
right,
culture back then. And I mean, Steve Kerr was on
right.
that team. So, I
Right.
guess,
And 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 it's interesting you bring up Jordan. So I'll come back. I'll complete the question to you. Complete the answer to your question. So basically, that creating that winning culture, that culture of winning was very very critical, right? And so coming back to the point of teams understanding that NBA teams understanding that losing is not the only way to win because in their idea, losing means getting that first pick or the top pick, and then it's a great draft, right? So now that apply to sport. As a matter of fact, no team wants to lose, right? And now, since you brought up tanking, I can argue that the tanking is not because they want to lose the game. The tanking is because they want to win the lottery. So the goal at the end of the day is still to win something,
yeah.
right? Whatever that end goal is, right? So finding that balance between making sure you spend the right amount of money versus winning is very critical. But here's something that's very important, and in sport, it's something you will understand, right? The most expensive player is not always the best player, and the best player need not always be the most expensive player, right? Sometimes, and even let's say, arguably, let's say the best player is the most expensive player. I'm just giving you a hypothetical example. But while he might be the best player, may not fit within the structure of your team. Right. Yeah. So it's very critical to understand that yes, there are a few players like your Ronaldos and Messis who whatever system you put in, they will be great, right? No doubt about it. But there are some players who thrive within a system, right? And so it's important that we don't only go chasing the best player overall or the most expensive player overall, but finding a player that fits within the system. Because if you find a player that does not fit within a system and you think he or she is the best player and you try to force them in, the system crumbles.
Mm.
So, any sport, it's not about balancing winning versus most expensive player, and it's about finding the right people, which goes back to my earlier point, finding the right people who are aligned with your principles and understand the emotion of why you're building the club. That's very, very critical.
Okay. So I have two last questions. We're kind of running out of time. So,
No.
in football, we also, see global collaboration and sponsorship deals. So, how important are these for a club's growth, especially in India? How are you leveraging that global collaboration?
So I think I don't know about global collaboration, but you have global brands that are looking towards India to obviously grow, right? And not just with football, but with any sport. You see the deals that are going in cricket. You see some of the deals in volleyball. You see some of the deals in football, like our deal with, Mumbai City's deal with Etihad. So I think this is in general, sport is always seen as a great platform for brands to be associated with. And in that sense, global companies who want to enter India and kind of work within the Indian market, they see sport as a great platform to enter the Indian market through. And that's as simple as that. There's no rocket science to it, if I may be say, if I may say so.
Okay. Okay, one last question I had was for, young students or young professionals who are interested in sports management like myself. What skills or experiences do you think matter the most? And, me, for example, as a grade 10 learner, where should I start? What should, I rack up as my experiences?
Sure. So when I hear the question, what skills are required, I'm always a little annoyed. And it's again not at you, but in general. I'll tell you why. What skill you should develop depends on what your interest is. And I'll explain this to you, right? Sports industry is just like any other industry, which means sports companies are just like any other company, right? So you have marketing, HR, tech, STEM, IT, scouting, XYZ, XYZ. There's a bunch of business functions, right? So what I would tell a young student such as yourself and your peers is first understand what do you know you're good at or what can you become good at, right? So if you know you're a creative person, then maybe sports marketing is for you. If you know you love data or you love numbers, then sports data is for you. If you know you love people, then maybe team management or league management is for you, right? If you know you love organizing events, then event management is for you. So I wouldn't go so far as to tell you or whoever is watching what skill you should learn. It's important to understand what skills you already have, right? And find a way to build those skills so that you can work in the sports industry, right? I remember talking to this young girl and her mother. She loves engineering. She wants to become an engineer. She's in the ninth grade. She wants to become an engineer, and she said, "I want to become an F1 engineer." Now, if she were to ask me, Jonathan, what skill should I develop? Why are you asking me? You are an engineer. Find a way to get to engineering, do a good engineering degree, find out what your passion, where your passion lies, and then find a job that works in the sports industry for you. So you need to join the two from that perspective, right? So somebody like yourself, when you started this podcast, you said you love business, you like the idea of business, right? So what's your skill set? So you find out, you build a good solid business understanding, right? Whether it is getting into investment banking or whether it is getting into management consulting or getting an MBA in business consultancy. And then you marry that with the sports industry. It's as simple as that. So there is no one particular skill. There are whatever skills you have, the sports industry will find a use for it because the sports industry is just like any other industry. It has all sorts of jobs in the industry. Gone are the days where the sports industry meant if you had to work in the sports industry meant you had to become a professional athlete or a coach or a physiotherapist. These were the only careers at one point of time. Now there are so many careers that you find the skill set you have, develop it, and then join the sports industry.
Okay, that's really it's a great insight. Thank you so much. So that's the end of my questions. I'll stop recording now.